gotta do what I gotta do.
Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 7 of the MMA Rundown. My name is Ben Gordon. I'll be your host again. We're going to be covering UFC 210 primarily on this episode. We'll also be going over the UFC on Fox card that's coming up next week, but a lot of stuff went on the UFC 210 card, and I want to get right into it right away. So we're going to start with the main event on that, which was Daniel Cormier defeating Anthony Rumble Johnson. So in the preview show last week when I was talking about this fight, I said I'd watch the first fight again and realized that every time that Rumble would kind of have something good going, he'd get a little bit too eager, and that's when Cormier would be able to close the distance on him and be able to start wrestling him. And I felt like over the year and a half, there wasn't going to be enough that Rumble could do to change this to get to the point where he'd win this fight. And when this fight came out, or when the fight started and Rumble came out, I was kind of surprised to see the adjustments he had tried to make. So initially my thought on what his adjustments might be is he may still try to strike with him, but kind of strike at a distance and kind of pick his shots, whereas in the first fight he landed that big right hand and then just started chasing after him. He got a little eager with the kicks in the second round and he just started throwing too many. Cormier would catch one and then get a takedown on him. This time around he started off by kind of like going for an oblique kick to the front leg of Cormier, which to an extent it makes sense. Cormier does have kicks, but he primarily likes to throw punches, and especially against a guy like Rumble, you don't really want to get too eager with your kicks and open yourself up too much. So to use that front kick to kind of stop Cormier from throwing too many shots of his own, or to get too aggressive and to really plan on his front leg and throw hard right hands, I understand that. But for him to come in and try to wrestle him, that was very bizarre to me. So Rumble is a very good wrestler, and he was able to get Cormier down a couple times. And in theory, if you think about Daniel Cormier, if he has to be underneath a guy like Rumble, and Rumble is throwing his ground and pound, that's a bad spot for him to be in. But if you're game planning for Rumble Johnson, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. That's not really a smart game plan to have, where you're going to say, hey, you're going to fight an Olympic wrestler who out-wrestled you, out-grappled you in the last fight a year and a half ago. We want you to try to do that to him this time. It really didn't make a whole lot of sense, and throughout much of the first round, Rumble would be pushing Cormier against the fence, then Cormier would be able to spin him around, then he'd kind of work for some stuff. I was actually kind of impressed on Rumble's end, where in the first fight, once they start getting clinched up, or even if Cormier would go for a takedown, Rumble would be really good at avoiding it, or Rumble wouldn't be good at it. He'd actually get caught and taken down. This time around, not as much when he was clinched up against the fence, doing a really good job of defending. He was also being aggressive at attacking in his own right, but even at times, I think Cormier at one point had either caught a kick or went in on a single leg. Thought he was going to be able to finish before he got to the fence. Wasn't. They got to the fence and they started grappling at it again. But eventually, after the first round was over, you'd have to give it to Rumble. There was that weird takedown thing at the end of the round, but either way, whether you give Rumble the takedown or not, you shouldn't. But even if you did, it wouldn't matter. He won that round. He broke Cormier's nose. Second round comes along, same type of thing. Rumble pushes him up against the fence. They clinch. This time, Cormier is able to get Rumble down towards the middle/end of the round. And then once he gets him down, it's kind of like the third round of the first fight, where he's just pounding on him, takes the back and gets a choke. And Rumble really wasn't doing anything to fight. He was just kind of sitting there taking the punches, wasn't really blocking, wasn't trying to turn into a guard and work his way back up. It was really bizarre. And even knowing what he said after the fight, for him to not even really try to fight back, like, it's just kind of bizarre to me. And it sort of shows that the reputation that Rumble has as being a bit of a front runner, he may say that it's changed each time a new fight comes around, but it really hasn't. I mean, obviously, for a guy who can strike as well as he does, you can be a front runner and get away with it against a lot of the best guys, because who's really going to stop you? But when you have a guy like Cormier who's really going to challenge you, and I'm sure Jon Jones would challenge him as well, you have to be able to dig deep, and he really didn't there, and that was kind of disappointing. So fight ends. They go to Joe Rogan. He's about to interview Daniel Cormier, and Cormier says, hey, Rumble, you can go first. And Rumble is asking for his coaches to come by, which it was kind of odd that his coaches were so far away, especially Henry Hooft. Even if they knew what Rumble was about to say, for them to be that far away doesn't make any sense. I feel like if they knew it, then they definitely should have been there. But even if you don't, like, you don't just walk away from your fighter, even if you feel like he gave up. So that I felt was pretty disrespectful on their part. Hopefully there's some other reason for it why they weren't there, but definitely did not look good at the time. But Rumble had said that he had gotten a job or a position somewhere else. Wasn't clear, didn't really specify what it was, but it was something that he had wanted, so now he's looking to move on. I don't know what that could be. You have to think, for what he makes in the UFC right now, he's definitely making six figures, and the more he fights, and especially if he's getting the finishes, definitely making a lot of money. He's been a competitor his whole life. He's wrestled. He talked about how he didn't want to have to deal with like all the sweaty guys in the room and all that. And that's a bit of a weird thing. I guess when you're preparing for a fight, you're working a lot harder, but there are a lot of guys who, just as lifelong martial artists, or just even people who are hobbyists, who do that just for fun. So I guess maybe it was the fight camps that kind of bugged him more than anything else. But for him to then say that he was going to retire and he was done with the sport, that was shocking. I mean, he's clearly still one of the best light heavyweights in the world. I would say he's number 3 behind Jones and Cormier, and with the power that he has, he can definitely knock any of those guys off at any point. And with Cormier being in his late 30s, you'd figure there's going to be a little pocket of time where Cormier is gone and it's just Jones and Rumble, and Jones just has to get in trouble once, and all of a sudden Rumble's the number 1 guy in the division and he can still hold a belt. So for him to leave at this point, it seems really surprising. Obviously, as an athlete, you only have a limited window where you can be at the top of your game, and he's within that window right now. So anytime he takes off right now doing something else is time that he's missing out on that, and it's time that whatever his job is now, if it doesn't go well for him, or maybe he just kind of gets bored with it and he has to look back and say, hey, I could have still been that guy. Who knows what I could have done? I was so close. I fought guys like Alexander Gustafsson. I fought Jimi Manuwa, Glover Teixeira, and just knocked these guys out within a round each. And I never really held the belt. That's got to be a tough thing for him to live with, and I'm sure at some point that's going to sink in on him, but you wonder how long it's going to be, and you wonder what his game's going to look like by the time he comes back. Hopefully it's not too long, but I mean, he was getting pretty emotional in the octagon. It sounds like this is something that he genuinely did plan and something that he's ready to move on from, so at the very least, I wouldn't expect to see him back within a year, if not more than that, but that's really unfortunate, and you hate to see it. As far as Cormier goes, he initially tried to get the fans to cheer for him, did the stupid little line where it's like, oh, what if I pretend to retire? Would you guys like that? And that's kind of a stupid line, and he got booed rightfully for it. But then after that, he was like, all right, fine, you guys are going to boo me anyway, let's go full heel. So then he started talking shit to Jimi Manuwa, saying, you just beat Corey Anderson, big fucking deal, you're not even ready for me, you can punch me right now barefisted, I'll take it, you have nothing for me. Then Joe Rogan asked about Jon Jones, and he did the Mike Jones thing where it was the whole, who? Mike Jones? Who? Mike Jones? But instead it was the Jon Jones thing. So Rogan would say Jon Jones. Then Cormier would say, who? Jon Jones. Who? Jon Jones. But eventually he obviously admitted, yes, I know who Jon Jones is. Called him out, did the line where it's like you got to get your extracurriculars in order before you can come back in the classroom. I thought that was a pretty good line for him. But he was just spitting fire at the end of it, and he walks away with the belt, and it looks like at this point, with July being when Jon Jones will be back, and with Cormier obviously having to take some time off to get his nose repaired, then the training camp afterwards, it makes the most sense that the Jon Jones fight is the next one set. There's the Gustafsson versus Teixeira fight that's set right now. What would make the most sense to me is you book Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier right now, but you tell Jimi Manuwa, I want you to be prepared anyway. Maybe you give Jimi Manuwa a fight with a guy who's outside the top 15 or something and just say, hey, look, if anything happens to Jon Jones, you're stepping into this title fight, and you work from there. That would probably be the right move to make. But again, I don't know what their plans are for the July event. I don't know if they're looking to do International Fight Week for this fight, if they want to look further along the lines. I don't know how long it's going to take Daniel Cormier's nose to repair. I don't know if he's had problems with his nose in the past. Obviously, with Rory McDonald, he wanted to take a long time off after his nose broke, but he had some serious chronic nose issues where it was just constantly breaking. So for him, that long layoff was needed. I don't know if that'll be the case for Cormier, but again, he'll have to go to the doctor and work that all out.